Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar today in the afternoon, talking about Fronius Compliance Options with the new SA regulations. Can I just get a show of hands or a few notes in the questions that people can hear me out there? And at least see if I can see some questions too. Good. Yep, there's a few coming through. That sounds good. Okay. All right. So today what we're going to cover is, I don't know how many of you were here last week on the last Friday. We did just a brief update as to what the potential avenues are to comply with the new regulations coming. Well, frog in my throat. Good time to have a frog in your throat before a webinar. Just go through the various options that you'll be able to use to comply with the new regulations. So we covered a couple of broad ones there. So today I'm going to go into more detail. So the webinar goes for roughly an hour. I'm going to go into more detail about these options just concerning the remote disconnect reconnect. That's required. The LVRT thing is pretty obvious. Okay, so we'll get underway. So the agenda today really is, I'll just do a brief thing about the general requirements. I mean, you guys are all pretty familiar with that anyway, just to get started off. Just a quick overview again of which agents and what options there are. And then with each individual agent or tech provider, I'll go into those in a bit more detail. Okay, so yeah, and then what we'll do at the end, there'll be, I mean, feel free to put in questions in the question box if you've got any questions. My colleague Sebastian is also on the line. Actually, I didn't even introduce myself, Rod Dewar, if people who don't know me. So, and yeah, if there's any questions, we'll cover them, you know, like Q&A thing at the end. Otherwise, feel free to type them in the question box, and if I see them while I'm doing a presentation, or if it's appropriate at the time with those particular solutions, I'll try and answer them there, and otherwise we should have time at the end to go through it as well. Okay, so yeah, general requirements. What is actually required? So obviously the South Australian government have implemented this new technical standard, basically that's requiring generating systems to be able to be remotely disconnected and reconnected by an agent registered with the technical regulator. So what do your end customers need to do? Obviously, the end customers have no idea what that means. So the poor solar retailers are left to try and explain that. There is, on the South Australian Government website, there is an information for customers which you could potentially point them to if you wanted to. I had a bit more of a read about that today. It does a bit of explain about why they're kind of doing this. However, basically the owner, the operator of the system, they do need to appoint an approved party, which is a relevant agent, who's then authorized to do the disconnect when they get directed by the government or AEMO. Usually it'll be one of the two. So this is the solutions that we're looking at to meet those requirements. So the overview, the current relevant agents for Fronius. So that means when you go to the South Australian Government website and you look up, you know, the list of relevant agents, we have Intellihub metering there. You've got SA Power Networks directly with Fronius. SA Power Networks with SwitchDin. SA Power Networks with Mondo, and then SA Power Networks with Watches. All of those solutions will work or are compliant to work with Fronius inverters. So now I'll go into each one of those in a bit more detail. So first of all, the Intellihub metering one. So that's Intellihub is a metering provider that has a lot of relationships with energy retailers in South Australia. Not with all of them. their website there, if you want to get some more information in general about Intellihub, is the link is there on the page. Also, we will be able to give you access to this presentation pack at the end of the the webinar, or happy to send it out to you later. So the Intellihub, what it does is the solution uses the extra elements on the smart meters, which you need to have these new smart meters that are getting put in. They have to have these extra elements that can where the solar could potentially be connected to individually. Depending on your configuration, there's a lot of different configurations on how that goes. So in some cases, you may be able to use this or may not. But it uses that extra element in order to either disconnect the AC supply to the inverter itself, and thus shutting it down, or using it to trigger the Drm Zero input on the inverter. The way that that gets communicated is the AEMA or South Australian Government, whoever gives the directive, they obviously contact Intellihub because they're the agent. Intellihub then has the communication down to their meters and therefore triggering the inverter. That would be that's done via the Telstra 4G or 3G network with that. So obviously, if you do have an area where that's not covered, you don't have coverage there, then you would need to that possibly may not be an option. Intellihub do have a dedicated information pack with a lot of information, a lot of checklists and guides as to everything you need to do with that. So the things I'm going to cover here, this is not exhaustive. This is just to give you a bit of an overview or a picture from the technical perspective. There's no guarantees for the correctness of everything I'm saying here, just get out of jail free card thing. But it is to give you a bit of a picture of what's out there and how it works. So, but for the exact details, best to contact the relevant agents themselves and get those exact details off them. What I have heard from Intellihub, so there are some cans and can't do's with their with their configuration and with their solution. The cans, I guess, there, so single phase home where the inverter is in the same building as a meter. If you've got 2 or 3 phase home with no controlled load, where the inverter is on the same building as the meter, that should work. Also 2 or 3 phase homes with control load and room in the meter box for an additional smart meter, or where the inverter is on the same meter as building as the meter. Some things you need to watch out for is then so any phase home, so single, 2 phase or 3 phase that has an existing smart meter. So, if it's already got a smart meter there, the retailer is not going to be swapping it out for an Intellihub one. So you need to be wary of that. Also, anyone that doesn't have a retail agreement with Intellihub, for example, energy locals don't have one. Any phase home with the inverters on a different building as well, because if it's on a different building, then you usually connect the inverter to a subboard, and hence you don't have access to go right back to where the meter board is. Also, 2 or 3 phase homes with control load and no room in the meter box for an additional meter, etc. as well. So yeah, just be wary of those. And there may be some other exceptions as well. So, but best to get in touch with Intellihub. Here's an example of what a configuration may look like for a single phase one there. This is taken out of the technical guide from the OTR, as is to your wiring diagrams. And in that case, you can see you've got your general load on your main channel there, and then the solar inverter. If it's solar only, that would be connected to the second channel, and that second channel is the one that they can remotely disconnect, etc. If you want any information, we've been told by Intellihub is to contact Jonathan Chi. I think I spelled his name wrong. I put an H in there. His mobile phone number there and his email address. Contact him directly for any more detailed information, or get the information packs if you'd like to use Intellihub as your agent. So I've got a couple of questions here. One of them is around a meter installation. The other day said no meters on the market that are capable of switching both J and solar 1 meter. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure. I can't answer that one. That might be something you can speak to Intellihub about. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't really answer that one for you. There's another one. Between single and 3-phase meter for Intellihub, yes, there is. So I think the 3-phase ones, you have to use an external contactor potentially. But again, best to contact them or contact John directly, and he can help you out there. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one. Again, if you've got more questions, I can happy to answer them at the end. So the next one, this is one is still kind of in the work. It's almost there. So this is the one we briefly mentioned last week. So this is the SAPN networks as the relevant agent with Fronius doing the actual control of the inverters internally. So that's a collaboration between SAPN and Fronius directly. So in that case, SAPN contacts Fronius directly. That would be via a phone call as they do it. And we carry out the control via the internal API. It does use the current data manager communication path to SolWeb. So when you're commissioning it, you do everything as you would usually do, just connect it to the customer's internet, etc. So there's no additional hardware needed for it. It's just using the customer's internet with that. The solution then, when we do get the command or let's say directive to shut it down, using that solution or this solution, the inverter, if it does have a Fronius smart meter, so FSM is Fronius smart meter, if you are using that, then it will go to zero export. So if the customer does have load on site or wants to use their own energy, they can do it using that. If it doesn't have a smart meter, then obviously we've got no way of determining what the export is, etc. And the inverter will go to 0 watts. So when the command, or let's say the directive has been given, okay, you can reconnect, then the way that will work is that the inverter will then be reinstated to its full output, or if it's previously export limited, I don't know, let's say you've got a Primo 8.2 and you've got it export limited to 5 kilowatts, then after the 0 export, that 5 kilowatt limit will be reinstated into the inverter. So it'll work as it did before. In terms of getting this solution or utilizing this solution, you register with SAPN, and I'll go through some slides here. So it's hasn't 100% been implemented yet. So we are listed officially with the OTR, and the one you want to select would be SAPN Networks / Fronius. And then during your SEG application, you need to select your SAPN Networks, and then you'll have as a relevant agent, and then selecting the Fronius API Control. We'll be using Fronius API Control of internet connected Fronius inverters. So unfortunately, that was meant to go up today, but it hasn't come up. However, we've been told that it should be up tomorrow. So if you do want to select that, you may have to wait. And I mean, I don't know if people will do that in the evenings, but yeah, you may want to wait tomorrow until that's up there. So as soon as we get notification of that, we'll put a notice out to industry on that one. So then some extra things that would need to be done. So we'll, this is just kind of a brief run through of some of the things that you'll need to do. We will be generating a full PDF application guide as to the various steps that you need to do, including what you need to do with SAPN. But some of the initial things, in order so that we know which systems SAPN have through us directly as the relevant agent, you will need to, when you set up your SolarWeb system, if you want to have it controlled, you will need to add that email address, so the agent@sapn.com.au, so that's the SolarWeb user, as a guest. So if you add them as a guest, you can see on the right-hand part of the slide, that means that SAPN will give us the directive and know which systems that we need to shut down. The other thing, which is a recommendation as well, at the moment we don't have any, let's say, tab or position in the on SolarWeb under the profile to add the NIMI to the NMI number. But in the interim, what they can do, because this is more about matching up systems, which systems you are under their control out of all the Fronius systems, is what you can do is under the settings and components section where you have the inverter, you can edit the name of the inverter and you can put in the NIMI number in there, and that'll give us another thing to cross-reference reference to in that as well. So on top of that, then the other procedures, I guess, will come up at the early next week as into what you need to do additionally going forward. One of the things that they have said, if on the ECOC, yeah, sorry, is on those, the things you will require is the inverter serial number. And obviously mean the address is on there anyway, and also recommend putting the NIMI on also on the ECOC to help line up which systems are under that as well. So if you, what SAPN have told us, if you don't fill out them correctly or if you don't have enough information, they will request you to fill that out, and if need be, they'll request you to go back to site to get that information. So make sure you have that on hand. Okay, so where are we here? Yeah, and then so this here as well, then that's what it looks like on the website. So, but pretty much all the rest of the stuff I explained there. As I said, we will come out with some more detailed information on what you will need to do going forward. What I might do is I might leave the questions to the end just to make it a little bit more easier, and I'll come back to those for you. The next solution is then SAPN networks with SwitchDin. So that's a collaboration between SAPN, Fronius, and SwitchDin. We've been collaborating with SwitchDin for many years now. This uses the SwitchDin droplet to trigger the internal inverter disconnection relay, so like similar to a Drm Zero. The droplet also does other things, collects data from the inverter and the Fronius smart meter. One of the advantages for this, I guess, is that the installation of it, it's done, you install it to the customer's network, so via a preferred is a LAN cable. You can do Wi-Fi, so you're not actually physically connecting this droplet to the inverter, so you don't have to mount it in the inverter or mount it in the inverter. It does just connect to the customer's internet and then does the controlling via there. So communication or the controlling is done via Modbus TCP over the customer's network. So it will find, so there's a whole bunch of commissioning and things you need to do with that. I won't be going into the details of that. Those details you can get from SwitchDin. So the hardware is a droplet. A little bit about the droplet, I guess. There's a couple of things, like it's an energy management device that you can use for doing other energy management within the house, so controlled loads, etc. It doesn't need the CTs, as I said. One of the things that we do use it for as well, what people are using in South Australia is for virtual power plants. So the home battery scheme it's getting used for when you're using that with Fronius batteries and Fronius systems. It comes in two forms there. The top one is the household one, and the bottom one is the utility droplet. They also have a cloud platform called Storm Cloud, which aggregates, stores and energy, data, energy data, and it can also work with other forms of DR as well. So it can then work independently if it loses communication. And as I said, it's used by many DNSPs for virtual power plants and microgrids, etc. So they covered that as well. So the left-hand one, again, I said, was the domestic one, and then the right-hand one is the industrial one. So the industrial one is more expensive, and it does have the 3G, 4G capability with that. In terms of the connection, as I said, you just connect it to the customer's router, either via LAN or Wi-Fi, and then that will then find the Fronius devices on the network. What you will need to do on the Fronius device is you'll need to, on the data manager, you'll need to activate the Modbus TCP port. The default is port 502, but you basically just activate it via Modbus TCP, and then the droplet will find it. And you go through the rest of the commissioning through the Droplet app. So on that one, if you want more details around that, yeah, visit the SwitchDin website, or they've got a special South Australian Smarter Homes landing page. That's the web address. So if you just go to that, they've got all sorts of details around you know, how to commission it, and all sorts of other things in there as well. And so feel free to get in touch with those guys. So the next one is then SA Power Networks with Mondo. So that's a collaboration, yeah, between SAPN, Fronius, and Mondo. We've been working with Mondo for a few years as well with the development of their device. Their device is what they call an UBI controller, and the device there at the moment uses the controller to disconnect the export of the or, you know, reduce the export of the inverter. The communication between that can be various. They do have multiple ways of doing it. So, but the one they do the most is via Modbus TCP or RS485. They do have I/O controls on the output as well. In terms of contact, if you want more information about that, Dominic is the one to contact. He's the product manager there, and he's got his mobile number and the email address. So a little bit more on that. So the UBI controller with the hardware thing, so it's an energy management device. It can do export control. It's got 6 metering circuits. For that, it does have like a 3 or 4G fallback connectivity on there. So it also can control other, you know, external batteries and loads. It's also, you know, used in virtual power plants and microgrids and things as well, and also things like FCAS, etc. As well. They also have an energy management platform, like a cloud-based aggregation platform. Again, you know, used for various different functionality, you know, VPP type things, also controllability of DR. Lots of, you know, other things. You can collect lots of data from various different devices and aggregate that, and do various kinds of fleet control with those devices. So that's the hardware overview, just as in a point form, really. So yeah, as I said, 6 metering circuits. It's got the 4G, 3G fallback on there. You can put in pulse inputs. It's got DRED capability. Also, you can do temperature monitoring if you want to do temperature sensing. Also, yeah, it's pretty much all contained in the one device, IP54 as well. So with this one, this is kind of what it would look like. You do install it with CTs. So you have the external CTs, which will then connect into the switchboard. Have your UBI device there. It runs off 230 volts AC. That uses that as the voltage reference to calculate the power as well. And then it communicates to the inverter via TCP via LAN, or could be, you know, Wi-Fi, for so long as it's on the same network. You can do that as well, or you plug into it directly. That's what the hardware looks like with that. So it's look, and here's your inputs there. Screw terminals to connect all your CTs to it, and your voltage references and your load relays if you need to. But again, if you want some more information on that, feel free to contact Dominic on that, and he'll give you a rundown of all the different capabilities that the device has and where you could use it. Okay, the next one then is from SA Power Networks with watt watches. SAPN is working with watt watches on that. We've done a little bit with watt watches, but not a huge amount. So probably not a huge amount of information I can provide on that. But do know that its device uses the I/O inputs from our inverter, or like similar to Drm Zero, in order to trigger the inverter to disconnect internally using the internal AC relays with that. So the device is installed in the switchboard. So you can see it's a DIN rail mounted 2-pole device. It does have Wi-Fi or 3G options with that. It also uses CTs in order to record data as well if you want to do monitoring. So it does lots of energy monitoring. You have various multiple circuits can be measured on that as well. That's what the device looks like. As you can see, it looks very similar to the solar analytics thing. I'm pretty sure the solar analytics use the same device, just with their software on it, as far as I know. So yeah, used for various solar monitoring and DR integration. Let's say building performance and sub-metering. It's got the 6 channels of measurement, and I think it's got 2 or 3 channels in terms of the IOs for disconnecting various devices on there. If you do want to get more information on that particular solution, then contact Watt Watchers directly on the info there below, info@wattwatchers.com.au, and there's the phone number as well. Okay, so I think I'm gonna move now to, that's covering what I wanted to cover there. So now I'm just gonna look into the questions here and see which ones I haven't answered. So it's one here. Do all inverters need Wi-Fi when they can be connected 4G? So I'm not quite sure 100% what is meant by that. So it needs to have some kind of internet connection depending on which solution you're doing. Maybe you might want to elaborate on that, which one you're looking at. So Fronius doesn't have a 4G, 3G option at the moment. We are looking into that, but potentially next year there may be an option for that. Otherwise, you need to use the customer's Wi-Fi or Ethernet for that. How do they switch Drm Zero? So I think that was referring to the meters, like the IntelliPro. There's 2 options with that. One of them is they actually use a contactor or the element there to disconnect the actual AC supply to the inverter. They did, however, tell us that they can use the Drm Zero input, so one of our IO inputs, which is then a dry contact, which you then configure with the data manager. So when that contact is either open or closed, depending on which way you want to do it, that will then trigger the internal relay to disconnect. So let's see. Someone's what would happen in the situation with a smart meter is installed and a Tesla Powerwall 2 is a disconnect request. So the disk depends on the situation with that. So if that's with the Intellihub metering system one, then with the Powerwall, I'm guessing that one would be a tricky one. You would have to use the Drm Zero input for that. That would then disconnect the inverter. I mean, the smart meter would still be fine and working, but however, that would the inverter would shut down, not work, but it wouldn't affect the smart meter, etc. with any of that. But those type of systems with the Powerwall, you would then have the inverter connected on the same circuit as the Powerwall, and the extra contact would be then used then to trigger the Drm Zero. I hope that kind of answered your question. How does this work with PV diverters, i.e., let's say Fronius own pilot? Would it help not to limit the inverter? Yeah, those ones are kind of tricky with that. I know if we do, well, let's say if you've got an inverter which does have an own pilot on it, and we do because we can do zero export with the own pilot. And that what would happen is the own pilot would still take the excess energy, but also the inverter would do zero export. So it would exactly ramp up as much as the own pilot can take, and still work in those situations. So not sure if that's what you meant by that, but so here we go. Just feel free to chuck another question in there if that didn't. So yeah, what's to stop a knowledgeable owner from removing SAPN from the guest list? Yeah, that's true. So the way that it will work is we synchronize. We'll be sending a list to SAPN. At this stage, it's looking like once a week. So they compare the systems and the people that have signed up, and then they will do a comparison with the list that we send them. We'll be sending them a list of all the customers that are signed up under that login, and the ones that don't appear, then they will be contacting the customer to let them know, say, okay, this has been removed, or we'll work with SAPN to see what's happened in the background, if they have been removed or not, and then they will have to then be notified that if they don't re-add it, then yeah, good question. Maybe the OTR will be notified or not. I'm not sure on that. But there is a check between us and SAPN to correlate those type of systems. If you have multiple inverters on site, from Prem, I'm not sure which solution he was talking about with that one. If that's the SwitchDin one, that's yeah, that is a bit trickier at the moment. So SwitchDin are, however, working on a solution that can talk to multiple inverters. At the moment, they can't, but I know they're working on that now. If it's using the Fronius solution, it'll just, whatever data managers are connected to that particular system under that login will that will trigger all of the inverters in that particular scenario. And with the other ones, I'm not sure about that. You would have to check with them. Can't put a switch inside device inside the inverter, as it's usually sealed warranty. Yeah, you don't need to put the switch in within the inverter. And so if a system has one Fronius inverter installed and a new Fronius added, are both inverter export limited without any difficulty? Yes, they can be. You can either, if you add a second one to the system, it depends if you have them in one SolarNet loop. So you've got two options. You can have the inverter one master and one slave inverter connected to that one. For the export limiting, they'll work together and export limit. And for the command remotely, we'll also export limit that as a whole system as well. Also, if you have them separately, so let's say you're only export limiting one and you're got the other one, so you've got two separate data logger IDs on the one system and they all join together on SolarWeb. In that particular case, the one which has got the meter connected, which is doing the export limiting, that one will be export limited, and the other one will go to 0 watts as well. So two various ways of doing it. You're probably better to have them master slaved and have it in a SolarNet loop on those. So it seems, someone's written here, it seems this option requires the customer's internet. What happens if the internet changes or they sell the property? Who's responsible to rectify? Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's one which is really kind of covered by the agent, or probably best to ask them. The way it will work, and none of these are ideal scenarios or solutions, but we'll be working together with SAPN. So initially what will happen is, let's say the customer changes their internet. If it goes offline, we'll be sending out an email saying that the system's offline and they need to reconnect to comply. If they don't do that, then yeah, I mean, what SAPN has said is that they'll have to look and see how many systems that are. If it becomes a certain amount, then the OTR may step in and look at then taking more measures. But the initial measures are just trying to remind the customer to tell them they need to reconnect and that they're not compliant if they don't, etc. So which options are zero export limiting? So yeah, the Intellihub isn't. That's a full switch off. The Fronius internal one is a zero export one. At the moment, the SwitchDin one is a switch off. However, they will be working towards doing a zero export type one. Mondo, I'm pretty sure if they were the CTs, they could do a zero export one if they want to, or the disconnect, they can do both. And then the Watt watches, that's just a switch off one at the moment. So they've got, is there any fail safe if internet connection is lost? Will the remote disconnect happen if then it's lost, or are there no fail safe requirements? So there's, for the remote disconnect reconnect function, there is no requirement from the OTR or SAPN to have a fail safe in there, because the basic this requirement is more of a stopgap, I guess. To the dynamic exports, which is coming mid next year or sometime next year. So there is no specification for having a fail safe. So yeah, look, if internet connection is lost, then it's lost. And as I mentioned before, it will be attempted to try and get those systems online. Depending on how many how often that happens or it doesn't happen, I guess that'll be a work in progress, and that'll be looked at as to what actually happens there. But I don't think in general no one really knows fully what will happen there. So well, some makes that don't require dismantle connect. I'm not quite sure what that one meant on that. Then how would a power divert affects the switch off the export limit? So yeah, depending on which power diverter, let's say if you're using a third party one, let's say I'm not sure, like a catch power or something. If you're using one of those, then they've got a separate CT, so they have to see a certain amount of export. However, they're not under the control. So how that works with the system, I'm guessing that they probably wouldn't work in these systems. You need to remember what we've heard about this disconnect reconnect functionality, or let's say this requirement, is SAPN's taken is that it probably only be used once, if anything, in the time until mid next year. I mean, of course, that's just them saying that, but there is a lot of other options that SAPN have, which they'll be using first before they want to do this option as well. So we're hoping that's not going to happen too often anyway. Ubi connects to 4G via supplied SIM ? I'm pretty sure it does come with the supplied SIM in there, if I'm not wrong. Best thing there is to contact Dom directly. He'll be able to help you out more on that. But as far as my understanding is it does. Yep. Then got a question with APIs, export limiting with 3-phase inverters net energy or per phase? So it's net with that. Someone's asking. So it does do a net phase limiting with that one. How do you regulate commercial solar? That's a pretty broad one. I'm not sure with that. I mean, depending on the solution, I think the Intellihub meter one, that will be tricky, I think, with that one. The Fronius one, again, if it's all on the single platform, on that single login, regardless how many data managers are on there, they'll all get the same command, so that solution would work. SwitchDin, depending how the inverters are connected on a commercial site, you can do that, but they don't have the multiple inverter functionality yet. Have to see how that works, but going forward they will have that functionality hopefully soon. Someone said the Watt watches is an on-off control, or can it be reduced export? At the moment, the Watt watches is just an on-off, as far as I understand. DRM, what does it mean? What does it stand for? Demand response mode. So DRM is a requirement in the AS 4777.2. So all inverters have to have that, at least the Drm Zero. So Drm Zero is a disconnect requirement. It just needs to have that capability in the inverter, which it does. So that's why I would use what they call demand response zero. So with Intellihub option, is the cost of the 3G passed on to the customer? No, as far as I know, it's not. Intellihub option's free, and that's just their own communication, because that's how they do the meter reading, etc. as well. That's my understanding, but yeah, again, just double check with Jonathan there and see how you go. So Prem was asking about, that was with the Fronius solution. So let me just say, so you have multiple inverters on site. Yeah, so with the Fronius solution, that's not a problem, so long as it's on the same system. So you have it all on the same SolarWeb system thing. You can have multiple data manager, data log IDs on there, or you can have a mix of them master slave and some not master slave. They all get the same commands on that site. Have two Fronius inverters, one existing on site and the other one in the shed. Sounds like would need to connect both for export control using smart meter. That depends on the actual limit you've been given. So if, let's say for an example, you've got it's 10 kilowatts, you've got 5 kilowatt inverter on the house and another 5 kilowatt on the shed, and you've been given a 5 kilowatt export limit, then you won't need to connect those inverters together to the export limit. You can just have the smart meter connected to one inverter, and that smart meter will read the total of what it's seeing on the site, and then obviously it will only control the one it's connected to. But in worst case, if there's no load on the site, then it'll ramp that one inverter that the meter's connected to down to 0, and the other one can run full bore at 5 kilowatts. And so in that case, you're still not exceeding that 5 kilowatt limit. To monitor them on SolarWeb, you have then 2 data log IDs. One of them has the meter connected and the other one doesn't, and that all the data combines together and gives you your all in one picture. If however it's a 0 export site, or let's say the export limit that you've been given from SAPN is less than one of those inverters, then you will have to have them connected together, because you'll need to be able to export limit both. But so, as I said, again, it really depends on your situation. And in terms of the shutting down, if it's on that one site, they'll both be given a 0 export command. The one with the meter will just 0 export, and the other one without the meter, it'll go to 0 watts. Okay, so got someone here. Which all energy providers support Intellihub meter like AGL, etc., while we keep Origin as relevant agent? Good question. That's probably a good question for Origin or Intellihub, I would say, on that one. I know Origin do use Intellihub. I don't know if AGL do, and to be honest, I don't know. I know they've got relationships with about 50% of the providers, or provide 50% of the meters in South Australia. However, you want to discuss with them probably in more detail with John about that one. What else have we got here? So, will Fronius and or SAPN be notifying that an event has occurred, or will customers see strange things, no production, no export, and start contacting installers for support? Yes, good question. So we won't be contacting customers. I'm not sure if SAPN somehow puts out a notification or not, or if there's maybe a notification on their website that there has been a directive for shutdown. At this stage, we haven't planned any kind of notification there, but that's something I can put to SAPN and find out, how they see, or how they see coming along, or how that might be happening. But yeah, definitely a good question for that. So as I said, hopefully this won't happen very often. So what's the other one? Properties with no internet. Yes, well, that's going to be very interesting, because it's going to have some kind of communication. I'm not sure how that would work. That would really have to be something to organise with SAPN on the SEG form, or like we could talk to them, or even the OTR. I think, as far as I know, and I don't hold me to it, but I think if there's absolutely no internet and there's no way of getting any kind of communication there, I'm pretty sure you can apply for an exemption with the OTR, that your site will be exempt from then having the remote disconnect. However, that would have to be an individual application for an exemption, is my guess. So don't hold me to it, but I mean, I don't see how any other way you'd be able to do that with that. So, CSC, will an existing owner with a Primo 6 installed before the 28th of the 9th, who expands their system with a new inverter, say Primo 4, the whole system now be subject to the new regs, or the entire system would be shut down where required, not just a new inverter? Yeah, so that's a good one. That'd be a tricky one. So we are keeping records of when the inverters, or let's say the system, came online, but that's something I'll take with me. I haven't thought of that one before. So we need to look in that, but I'm pretty sure on our back end, because what we do is it's not all systems, you know, when we do the lookup and the aggregation, we are looking at systems installed after the 28th of the 9th. But if it's on the same SolarWeb system, then that might be, yeah. So that might be a case where you we might need to really look in to see what's done there. But I'll look into that. Maybe, you know, get in touch with us in a couple of weeks once we have more around the solutions, and I'll try and keep you guys up to date. So how does OwnPilot deal with switch off export? OwnPilot needs export rating from InPowerMeter. So yeah, the way it works is the OwnPilot, it doesn't look, I mean, it takes the data from the smart meter, but it has what they call an internal energy management calculation, which basically internally ramps the inverter power up without ramping the export, or, you know, being able to see the export, and coordinating that with the OwnPilot. So that does work. It'll still see 0 on the smart meter, but it does take in the let's say the excess energy or potential excess energy first to the OwnPilot before it actually export limits it. What advantages of having other devices switch in over simple Fronius with smart meter, 0 feed? So SwitchDin, I guess there's a couple of things they offer. You know, be able to control other loads on site. I think they do integration. If you've got multiple vendors, I don't know, let's say you've got some kind of AC battery there and then a Fronius, you can probably integrate those together. They do other kind of reading out of the DNSP meters. I know they do things like that. And I know depending on which, what do you call it? Depending on which kind of login or let's say capabilities or features you want to have with SwitchDin, there is a capability where you can tunnel in via a VPN and get access to the data manager card's web interface. So if you want to be able to do remote setting changes on the data manager web interface, you can get access via the SwitchDin device through their portal, etc. But yeah, best to speak to them about it as well. Is there any cost for the SAPN Fronius API solution? No, there isn't. That's is a totally free solution. Commando Solution handle multiple inverters? Yes, it can. As far as I know, they can. They can do commercial sites as well. But yeah, I double check to check with Dom on that one to get some information. Origin option is only for customers or Origin Solar. Yeah, I did ask that to them. They said, yeah, at this stage, yes. However, they are debating if they would want to take on, you know, customers which aren't theirs to help provide a solution. So, but that's what I've heard so far. But yeah, probably best again to ask them. Another question, does second inverter need a data manager card to have an inverter ID on SolarWeb or be switched to 0 export? So again, depends, or it doesn't need to have a second data manager card. You can do either or. So you can do the master slave. You can, if it's a single phase thing, they've all got data managers in where you just switch it off. And you just master slave the first inverter to the second. and they'll both be reduced to 0 export. If you have them separately, if you have one which is export limited and the other one's not, so 2 separate data log IDs, then they'll still be switched off together. Just the one with the meter will be 0 export, and the one without it will be 0 watts from the output. So otherwise connected to master inverter, I guess. Yeah, that's kind of similar. Will any export limit be flagged? The data download from Fronius? No, not in that case. When we get it, I mean, that's something I can potentially ask R&D if we can do. If there's like let's say an event message that we can send out for systems that were shut down, that might be something that we can potentially do. I'll take that on board and find out if they can do that. Not exempt. All systems require connection to internet as of 28th, or they are required to be set to 0 export. So so that's answer your question there. So again, yeah, if it's a rural thing which has no communication, nothing, sounds like there is no exemption. Yeah, you'd need to set it to 0 export, because having systems in general, like 100% of the time set to 0 export, they don't really require this external remote disconnect functionality. So properties with Fronius and third-party inverter setups. Yeah, that one's if you got 2 separate inverters, that one be a tricky one. You might have to, yeah, you might have to use a third party with that one, potentially like a SwitchDin or something, or a Mondo. I know they do multiple vendor integration with that, and I think watches would do as well, because it's a fairly straightforward thing, on-off disconnect type thing. But yeah, that would be a trickier one to do. Would need to kind of best probably get in contact with. I mean, obviously through our API we can't control a third-party non-Fronius inverter, so our one would be not usable. I mean, you would be able to use it with just the Fronius, but then the customer would have 2 agents, and yeah, that's getting pretty messy, and I'm not sure even if that's allowed or not. So yeah, best to possibly talk to some of the other vendors on that one. Okay, good. All right, well, that's all the questions that have come up. I hope I was able to answer them all enough. So just as I guess going forward, we will keep you all up to date as new things come to light. As soon as we know that the SEG approval is there, or the SEG, let's say, choice and the drop-down menus in there, we will also let you know on that, and working as hard as we can to get an application guide out to give you like a step-by-step instructions on what you need to be doing with the inverter. So, but basically, you should, so long as you've got your serial number and your NIMI, I mean, it's on SolarWeb. You can then commission your systems as you do, and then from the office or remotely, you can add the SAPN agent to that, and the NIMI number and things as well. So you shouldn't need to require you to go back to site with that. So yeah, someone's asked about the slides. So yes, we can email the slides out to everyone after this is finished. So I'll see, it might not a bit late tonight, not be able to manage to do it tonight, but or should be able to get it sent out tomorrow. Okay, all right, well, looks like there's no other questions. I'll leave you guys to get to your beer, gin tonic, or whatever it is you want to get to, or your dinner. Thanks a lot for joining us, and yeah, look forward to having you some of our other webinars. Okay, all right, no worries, guys. Thanks for joining, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Catch you later.